Peace. My name is Allah Forever. I'm the creator and owner of BabyBeautiful.co, which is an online baby store that we sell baby clothes. I would ask that all that see this video go to the website. It's called BabyBeautiful.co and support our website. Support the future generations of our nation, which is the babies. We sell the best quality clothes to dress our babies. We are attempting to open a new avenue where which we control the clothes that our babies wear and use that as an economic base to develop communities and businesses that will enable us to be self-sufficient and independent as a nation and as a people in America. We're talking about ownership, black ownership of our own businesses and controlling our own communities, where our children will begin to develop and grow in healthy environments. So I would ask you to go to our website and support the clothes that we sell for the babies. Now, each week I do a video that pertains to the babies for that particular week. Now, this week, the video that I'm doing directly relates to the babies again. We're in what is called Black History Month. And in being in Black History Month, we should acknowledge certain people who played a key role in shaping our history as a people in America and the struggle and fight to be free. So today, this video is going to deal with the subject of sex, relationships, and marriage. But before I go into the video, let me first acknowledge that today is February 22nd, 2018. And in our nation history, which is the nation of gods and earths that many are familiar with, is probably the 5% nation. But in our nation of history, February 22nd is the birthday of the man who established the nation of gods and earths that was formerly called the 5% nation. His name was Allah. He was born February 22nd, 1928. So each year we observe and acknowledge his contribution to building and establishing a nation of young men and women that carried on the teachings and the traditions in which he established. So I wanted to acknowledge him today because it's through his teachings that as a young man, I was able to gain knowledge of myself and see the world from the perspective of a black man that was conscious of who he was and who he is today. So I wanted to acknowledge his contribution today in doing this video. In fact, my watch has a picture of him in it, and I walk around as a constant reminder of the contribution that he made towards not just me gaining the knowledge of myself, but helping to raise the consciousness of many young black men and women that were lost in America during the 1960s. It was his establishing of the nation of gods and earths that was formerly called the 5% Nation that raised a lot of those young men and women to adulthood where they became conscious of themselves and got knowledge to enable them to be self-sufficient and carry on the teachings of a man that many of them never met or even knew. So in saying that, I acknowledge him today in doing this video. Now let me get back to the subject. This video will be titled Sex, Relationships, and Marriage. Now the reason why I decided to do a video about sex, relationships, and marriage is because as a people in America, we have oftentimes been confused in those areas. We've made bad choices, and those choices created many problems that we suffer from today as a people. So I want to deal with that particular subject, sex, relationships, and marriage, because we have not really looked at how we deal with sex, relationships, and marriage. We just become involved in these different things, but we don't really have an understanding, a deep-rooted understanding of the choices and the decisions that we make to engage in sex, relationships, and marriage. Now, as a young man growing up in New York City, I was born and raised in the South Bronx. So I grew up basically most of my life in the South Bronx. Childhood, that is. And growing up in the South Bronx during that time of the 70s and early 80s, I didn't have a real understanding or knowledge about sex, relationships, or marriage. And I can say safely that that was the same attitude of many young black men and women growing up during that time era in the South Bronx. And I can even go further to say in America, period, as young black men and women, we didn't have a deep-rooted understanding of what sex, relationships, and marriage really entailed. So we made choices based upon our own upbringings, the influences that was surrounding us at the time, and the people that was in our environment that told us basically what these things meant. But many of us, as a result of that, was misled about sex, relationships, and marriage, because they themselves did not have a deeply rooted understanding and knowledge about what sex was, what relationships was, and what marriage was. They was also badly influenced by their surroundings and the people that they were surrounded by. So they passed that on to us. And now we have another generation that still don't have a deeply rooted understanding of what sex, relationships, and marriage is really all about. So we begin to make the same kind of choices and decisions that they made in their youth, which was all wrong. So I want to say today in this video that we need to examine that. We need to closely look at the kind of decisions and choices that we make when we deal with sex, relationships, and marriage. Because many times we just jump into this without having a deeply rooted understanding of what they entail. So the first area that I want to deal with is sex. Because before we know anything, we engage in sex freely. And I'm talking about on both sides, male and female, young man and young woman. Before we even understand what is going on in the world, before we even have an understanding of ourselves as individuals, we begin to engage in sex. And this approach to having sex is what created a lot of the unwanted children that many young black men and women have today, and children that don't have a understanding of who they are, and they growing up in poverty and in a world that they have no idea of what it's really all about. But because we don't have a clear understanding of what sex is before we engage in it, we don't see the problems that it creates down the line. So this is why I decided that I wanted to deal with this particular subject, because today we still have young black men and women having sex with each other as a result of not having no full understanding of what this is really all about. And they're producing children as a result of that. Not only that, they are infecting each other with all kinds of diseases. And this is something that is serious, because we have never been taught actually what sex is all about. We just come up and naturally just engage in it with each other without having any full understanding of what we're doing. We just doing it. Because as a young man growing up, I was influenced by the very same environment, the people that were surrounding me, to just freely engage in having sex. And I did what normal young men and women did with each other, have sex, without no full understanding or grasp of what we was doing. We was just doing it because that was the thing to do. We thought that that was what you did as young men and women. We were never taught any deep-rooted history about engaging in sex with each other. We had no understanding of what this would lead to or what it meant to us as individuals. We just engaged in it because it was something to do being opposite sexes of each other. And this is something that was passed on to us from the people that we were surrounded by and the generation before us. They didn't give us examples, positive examples, deeply rooted in understanding of what sex entailed and what it was really all about before we made the decision to engage in that. So you had many young men and women, including myself, that was having sex so freely and openly with each other like it was nothing. We began to devalue what sex was. That it didn't really have no real meaning to us. So we would just meet each other and engage in sex anywhere, anytime, with anybody. We had no discretion as to who we dealt with it with, where we dealt with it at, and what time that we dealt with it, with each other. This is because we had no idea or clear understanding of how we were supposed to do this. Because there was never a format laid down, any rules and regulations, guidelines that would guide us to understanding how to make choices in having sex with each other. So we just went on our own and just had sex on a number of occasions with many different people, and it didn't really mean anything. So we have a generation of young men and women that don't value each other, don't even look at each other with respect. We have both young men and women dealing with each other as if they're objects. And now we don't even look at each other with respect. And that's all as a result of sex. Many young women don't even see themselves as being valued within themselves. And forget about young men, because to them, that's what it's all about. to have as many sexual partners as you can possibly have, to engage in sex with as many young women as you can possibly do it with. Because this is something that defines the definition of manhood to them. Which is a concept that is all wrong. Engaging in sex or being able to engage in sex with a young woman has nothing to do with defining manhood. But many of us, we were conditioned and taught to believe that through our peers, through the people that we were surrounded by, through our family members, because we watched them and see how they dealt with sex. And it was the same way, freely. So we began to exhibit the same kind of behavior because there was no other examples shown that we could have learned from. So we did the very same thing. And then the media and the images that we see on the television, through the movies, the television, the different people that we were surrounded by, the influences, all of this shaped how we begin to see sex and how we begin to see each other as objects to fulfill our sexual pleasure or desire. Sex is not for the purpose of recreation or gratification. It's for procreation. Let me say that again. Sex is not for the purpose of gratification or recreation. It's for procreation, to produce life all over again, to extend into the next generation, to produce the children of tomorrow. But we must understand that before we engage in that, we need to be able to understand the deeply rooted meaning of what sex entails. And then to engage in that with the opposite sex. We need to understand what this is really all about before we make a serious decision like that. Now, of course, this is something that I didn't know growing up as a young man. Had no idea. I just dealt with this girl, that girl, this girl, that girl. Didn't matter to me because it didn't matter to them. We were of the same mindset. We came from the same background, the same environment. So we was influenced by the same things in regards to what sex meant, which was nothing. It didn't mean anything to us. She liked me, I liked her. So we just had sex. Not even thinking about what it meant. It didn't mean anything to us. And this is the same pattern of behavior that is happening with this generation. They have no understanding of the deep rooted meaning of what sex is about because they don't even understand themselves. In order to understand what sex is really all about, you need to understand yourself, your whole biological makeup, the physical anatomy of yourself. You need to understand that and what it really means when you begin to take yourself and now make a decision to join with the opposite sex. That requires a lot because not only are you indulging in sex with the opposite sex, but you have a deep-rooted understanding of where this is going and what it's supposed to mean to yourself as well as to the opposite sex. But of course, none of us even think about that. That's why children are produced as a result of us having sex. And in many cases, far too many cases, those children are not properly nurtured, educated, and taught properly because they are growing up basically the same way we grew up. Not understanding what sex is really all about. So we need to really view that from a different perspective. Now let me get into relationships, which is another area that we don't understand. Another area where we have a problem with. Because many of us mix the two. We think that having sex, engaging in sex with someone, is automatically a relationship with that person, which doesn't mean that at all. This is where the confusion comes in at. Because you decide to have sex with someone, that doesn't mean that y'all have a relationship. Although that's supposed to have that meaning, that doesn't mean that it has that meaning. Because if you didn't see any meaning in having sex, then of course you don't even think in terms of a relationship. So when you develop an understanding with the opposite sex and y'all begin to establish a relationship with each other, that means that y'all have sat down and discussed what it is that each one of y'all bring to the relationship and what is the aims and goals of this relationship. Where is it going? And what do you want to get out of it? Because if you don't establish that in the beginning, then there's no relationship. You're just having sex. Because there's no understanding, there's no agreement, there's no commitment. In a relationship, there's an understanding, there's agreements, there's commitment. If none of those things exist, then that's not a relationship. You're just having sex. So we need to understand exactly what a relationship is. It requires commitment, dedication, agreement on both sides to engage in forming what a relationship is. If those elements are missing, then that's not a relationship. You're just having sex. And it doesn't require anything to have sex. You just do it. Sex is very important in a relationship. But if you have no understanding of the deeply rooted meaning of sex, then it has no meaning. So you just deal with a relationship the same way you deal with sex. Have no meaning. Because you have no deeply rooted understanding of what sex is. So you take the same approach when you deal with a relationship. It has no real meaning. Because people are in relationships with each other, but they deal with other people too. They call it an open relationship. What is that? Open relationship. You just come up with your own meanings, huh? This is what has happened. We have really defied all of the real true meaning of what sex and relationships is. We just made up our own thing as we went along. Because we really had no understanding of it in the beginning, so we just made up our own. That's why you have so many problems in relationships. The abuse is widely spread in relationships. I'm talking about mental, emotional, physical, and psychological abuse. And I'm talking about on both sides, male and female. Because they had no idea or understanding of what a relationship was anyway. Relationships should mean that you are in turn accepting another person to begin to share your life with. And hopefully, y'all will have so much in common that y'all begin to look at it as ready to establish a family, ready to take it to the next level and get married. It should mean that you value the person that you are in the relationship with. And the same thing on the opposite side. There's a mutual understanding between both man and woman about each other and where this relationship is headed. It means that you are beginning to really see the value of one another. Really beginning to understand that you now cannot just think about yourself, but you must think about the person that you are in a relationship with. that is no longer a solo thing. Now you must include the person that you have decided to share a part of your life with. That's if you have a deeply rooted understanding of what a relationship is. It means that at times you will have to agree or disagree with each other on issues, subjects, or topics that may come up, and deal with that in a respectful, adult manner. Not take it to the level where it becomes abuse on a mental, physical, emotional, or psychological level. That's what a relationship should entail. Now, let me get to the marriage, because marriage is the ultimate of what people should be looking to do in their life. It is looking to fully dedicate and commit yourself with someone else in sharing your life and raising a family. Of course, those things escape marriage today because in America, marriage has become like a mockery, a sham. People marry for many of the wrong reasons. You have people that marry for money, people that marry because the sex is good, people that marry because they believe that this person is someone that fulfills them physically or emotionally. So in many cases, people marry for the wrong reasons. Now, the institution of marriage has been around since the beginning of human existence. But there was a guideline, rules and regulations that really guided what a marriage is supposed to be based on. But we've gotten away from the guidelines, the rules and regulations in which a marriage is supposed to be based on. This is why you have a high rate today in divorces and people not being married. They'd rather just have sex or be in a relationship but not be married. So the institution of marriage has been devalued by many people marrying for the wrong reasons. In fact, they begin to view marriage more along the lines of just having sex. So it's lost its real value and meaning in the minds of many today. And that's something that is really more American than anything, because the reason why I say that is because much of the research that has been done based upon marriage and different societies around the world says that marriage in America is more of something that is not respected on a high level as opposed to other places around the world. And that is because many of the societies around the world view marriage different from the way people in America view it. They still hold it as a sacred institution. They still hold it as having value to it. If you look at many of the societies around the world, even look at many of the Muslim countries, the ultimate thing that a man and woman look forward to is the marriage and having a family. That is not the ultimate of what we look upon in America as doing. That's why many of these societies around the world, marriage is still looked upon as a sacred institution because they are taught the value of understanding each other, not dealing in premarital sex, not dealing in relationships, but really focusing on getting married. So the sex and the relationship thing don't exist. They're looking for the ultimate, marriage and raising a family, to prolong their existence as a society of people. That's something that is not looked upon in America the same way. Marriage is supposed to be about prolonging the society and the people. But in America, for some reason, it is looked upon as just two individuals, deciding to get married for whatever reasons they decide to get married for. And the true value of it, the sacredness of it, is not there. Because they don't come from a society like that, where the promotion of marriage is the ultimate, where you understand the value of life and that you should share your life with the opposite sex to raise a family. That is the ultimate of being a man and a woman. But in American society, we are taught that you can basically do anything you want to do. You have the opportunity to do whatever you want to do. In having that idea, many people deal with sex, relationships, and marriage as if it's nothing. You have people that's been married 3 and 4 times. It's ridiculous. You going through marriage like that, that says that you really had no real meaning or understanding of what marriage was when you did it the first time. That's why you repeated it more times after that. I remember reading a story about Queen, no, about, yeah, I remember reading a story about Elizabeth Taylor, who was a well known actor in the 70s and 80s. I remember reading a story about her being married to many different men, at least 7 times. And I'm saying, in my mind, what woman would be married to 7 different men? I mean, what men would even marry a woman that had been married all those times? That's, I mean, to me, unimaginable. I even look at young women today, and many of them having sex with all kinds of young men. Who would want you as a wife after you've already engaged in sex with all these different men? Who would want you as a wife? That's like marrying a prostitute or marrying a porn star. You know, porn stars, they just have sex as a career, as a job. That is ridiculous. So to even think that you would want a man to marry you, well, are you someone that someone would want to marry? If you have allowed yourself to engage in having sex with all different kinds of men, and it's publicly known, who would really want to marry you? You've experimented with all type of sexual acts with different men. Who would really want to marry you? And then on the other side, we have a lot of young men and men, period, that have dealt with all kinds of sexual explorations with different young women or women in general. And now they're looking to marry a woman. Well, what kind of woman would you really want to marry? The ones that you've engaged in all type of sexual explorations with, or a respectful, valuable, moral woman? These are questions that you have to ask, because the reason why marriage is viewed the way it's viewed in America is because of all of the factors that I mentioned. So we need to look at how we view marriage in America. The same way we need to look at sex and relationships. It shouldn't be where we have to deal with sex and relationships, because many of us never make it to marriage. We got so caught up in dealing with sex and relationships that we never even made it to marriage. So many women today and men for that matter, will go unmarried in their life because that's not something that they value. It's not sacred to them. It's not an institution that they look upon with respect. No. They content with just having sex and being in relationships. So we need to really do a deep understanding of what sex, relationships, and marriage really mean. Because if we don't, we will continue to pass on the same ideas to the future generations of our children. Your babies that are in the world today or that will be born in the world of tomorrow will have the same ideas that you yourself had about sex, relationships, and marriage in your generation. They will wind up having the same ideas, which are all wrong. We see that from the many different problems that we have as a people in America. The mental, physical, emotional, and psychological abuse in relationships and in having sex and in marriages. You have people that kill their husband or wife, people that kill people that they're in a relationship with, people that kill people that they having sex with. And if they don't kill them, they seriously injure them or abuse them mentally, emotionally, psychologically, or physically in some shape, form, or fashion. And it all goes back to the root of the problem because we have no understanding of what these things actually mean before we actually engage in doing it. So we need to really seriously look at that within ourselves and begin to question ourselves about what does it mean to have sex? What does it mean to be in a relationship? What does it mean to be in a marriage? I'm talking about before we begin to indulge in this. And if we have already dealt with it, then we need to step back and now look at it from a more deeper level. So with that, I'm going to say peace and blessings.